Good afternoon, or good evening, or good morning, depending what time zone you are in. Welcome to this week's edition of Drupal Chat. Today I'll be talking about participating in the issue queues. I'm Mark Isaacson and I'm your host. You can find me on Drupal.org at Vegan Triathlete. So pretty much any module that you use, you will find that there are going to be some issues. I don't think you're going to find one project, one module on Drupal.org that doesn't have some issues associated with it. I don't know. I guess it depends. Like when you look at the Drupal project itself, I don't know that every single one of its modules has issues documented against it. But, and then the same thing with contributed modules. I don't know that every single one of their submodules has issues documented against them. But pretty much when you go to any, Drupal.org/project/project name, I don't think you're going to go to a single one that doesn't have some issues documented against it. And I don't know, maybe themes, maybe you'd find that there are some themes that don't have any issues documented against them. Haven't checked that out. So, so pretty much, there's always an opportunity for you to get involved and contribute something to the Drupal project by going to an issue queue. And I'm going to go over a few ways that you can actually make a difference helping out in the issue queues. So first of all, you're going to want to make sure that you're going to a /project/project name of something that you actually use and that you're reasonably familiar with, so that you can have an understanding of what people are writing about in the issue queue. And one of the first things that you can do when you look at the issue queue is to, well, just do that. Like look through the open issues in the issue queue and see if you find any duplicate issues. Because that's something pretty easy that you can help that module maintainer with, is eliminating duplicate issues. Choose whatever, maybe choose the newer one to mark as a duplicate of the older one. Would probably make the most sense. And the way to know which one's the older one and which one's the newer one is that when you go to the issue, you will see it's going to be a node on Drupal, and it's going to have the node ID attached to it. And whichever node ID is a smaller number, that's the older issue. And the newer ones are going to have a higher node ID assigned to them. So you can look through the issue queue and see if you notice any duplicate issues. Now, I suppose maybe you might choose to mark an older issue as a duplicate because maybe a newer issue with that same, a newer node that's documenting that issue, maybe it was documented better. Maybe they did a more complete job of writing the steps to reproduce the problem, or maybe there's been more comments in that. People noticed that one, they hadn't noticed the older one, maybe because it had a better title or something like that. I don't know. So there might be situations where you would decide to go to the older node and mark that as a duplicate of the newer one. And honestly, I don't know whether it would make too much of a difference either way. I think that the module maintainer would be happy just to have somebody help triage that issue queue and get rid of the duplicates in whatever way that you get rid of them. And it's a pretty simple process. You would go into the issue, you're able to update it, and well, actually, I guess you wouldn't use the edit tab. You would be doing it through one of the comments below, but you would change the status of it, and you would say that you're going to close it, and you're marking it as a duplicate. So let's see, if you go under the issue, let's see, is it issue summary and relationships? No, where do I get, hang on a second here. Let's get to the metadata, sorry, issue metadata. And you, under the status, you could change it to say closed duplicate. And then you might also go into the comment there and reference the ID or the, the path name for the issue that you're marking it as a duplicate of. So that's way number one that you could get involved in the issue queue, is just help to clean things up that way, eliminating duplicates. Another way that you can get involved is that you can see whether you are able to actually reproduce the problem. So again, this is why it's helpful to choose a project, a module, that you have familiarity with, because you have some idea of how to use the module. And so when you read the issue, you can see whether you can actually reproduce the problem that the person is reporting. And there are at least a couple of things that could happen when you do that. One would be that you can reproduce it. That yes, in fact, I'm seeing this same behavior. And if the person had given a good set of steps about how to produce the problem, there's maybe no further work for you to do other than saying, yes, I'm seeing this same behavior in my environment. One thing that you might be able to contribute beyond that is that if the original poster stated this is what my environment looks like, this is what version of Drupal I'm on, what release I'm on, this is what contributed modules I have installed, and any of that kind of stuff. And then you could also say, well, here's what my setup looks like, because there could be process of elimination that can go on there that would help the module maintainer to figure out, okay, well, where does this issue actually arise? Because I can see here's two different environments and both of them are seeing the issue, and so I know, it's probably not going to be, one or other of these things, because these are different between the two environments, and yet both people are still seeing that same issue. So that's one thing you can do if you are able to reproduce the issue. Something else that you may be able to contribute when you reproduce the issue is that maybe the original poster didn't give a step-by-step description of how to reproduce the issue. And so you could contribute that and say, here's the steps that I took. First I did this, and next I did whatever, and so on until you get to the point where, and how the issue manifests itself. So see if you can reproduce the issue. You might find out that you can't reproduce the issue. And so there's a couple of things that you may do in that situation. One is that you may update that issue just with the comment. It's stating, I can't reproduce this issue. I'm not having this problem in my environment. Can you give some more details of your environment? Or if they haven't given the steps to reproduce it, can you give the steps to reproduce the issue? Because I'm not seeing the issue right now. And so you can help move that along by getting a bit more detail into that issue queue about how to reproduce that issue. Another thing that may end up happening is that you may be able to tell the original poster, oh, this really isn't an issue at all. I think why this is happening is that you haven't set some things up properly. You haven't configured some things properly, or you're misunderstanding how this is supposed to work. If you do this instead of doing that, I think this is going to work the way that you are wanting it to work. So, you may be able to help get that issue closed just by having that conversation with the original poster, letting them know that, well, do this instead of that. And then they may say, oh, okay, I didn't realize that. Okay, fine. Yes, works as designed. And then that issue's closed. So let's say that neither one of those, that you need to progress beyond that. It's not a duplicate issue. You are able to reproduce it. This isn't some configuration problem. It's not a works as designed. It's clearly a bug that's here, and the steps have been documented clearly. At some point, somebody may contribute a patch for that. And I'm taking right now the suggestions I'm giving here, I'm taking them from the perspective of somebody who's not a coder, who's not really technical. I'll finish up with, if you are somebody who's a coder, who's got those technical skills, ways that you can contribute. So I'm just going to continue right now from the perspective of somebody who's not really going to be writing any code. So you've maybe gone through these other two ways that you can participate in the issue queue, and you've gotten to the point that now somebody has contributed a patch for this issue, and they say, hey, like, I think this fixes it. And so then you can apply that patch. And I understand it can be a bit intimidating, a little bit confusing to understand how to apply a patch. And that's beyond the scope of what I'm going to discuss in this chat here. Maybe that would be worthwhile to have as another chat, like how do you apply patches? And there actually is documentation on Drupal.org about different ways that you can apply patches. So we'll see if I do another chat on that one, go into more detail on it. But for now, I'm going to kind of leave that up to you, and just give the suggestion that what you can do is apply the patch in your environment and see if it does fix the problem. And then you can report back on that. You can say, I applied this patch and yes, it fixed it, or I applied this patch and no, it didn't fix it, or I wasn't able to apply this patch. I ran into this error when I was when I was attempting to apply the patch. So all of those are ways that, as somebody who's not a coder, and I'm going to say who's not a technical person, although again, granted that applying a patch is a bit technical, but once you get the hang of it, it's like you don't have to know how to program to be able to apply a patch. So now let me move into the things that a person who does have more technical skills can do to get involved in the issue queue. So let's say that you were this non-technical person and you applied the patch and you said, yes, I'm not having that problem anymore. This looks good to me. And maybe somebody else has tested it as well and said it fixes it. And so you, as the second or third or whoever person that's saying, yes, it fixed it in my environment, you may be prone then to say, I'm going to change the status to RTBC, reviewed and tested by the community. And that may be perfectly fine. You've taken it as far as you can take it there. Now, somebody who's more technical, somebody who is a coder, maybe they don't have the time, they don't have the inclination, maybe they don't know the module well enough to be able to actually dig in and write a patch. But what they can do is they can review the patch. And if you're going to do this, it's very helpful to use the browser plugin. There's this Dreditor browser plugin that makes it much easier for you to review the patch and to comment on the patch. So if you want to do that, do take a look at getting Dreditor installed. I think they've got the plugin for Firefox now. It was originally written for Chrome, but I believe it may have also been supported so that you can do it as a Firefox extension. Not positive about that. I haven't tried it. I've installed it in Chrome, and so I just use Chrome when I'm doing these things. But it's very helpful to have that tool so that you can do a review of this patch. And when you review a patch, some things that you would look for would be whether the patch writer is conforming to coding standards. You might look to see whether they've introduced like any SQL injection or cross-site scripting vulnerabilities in the way they've written the code. And something else that you may notice, because I've come across this on more than one occasion when I've reviewed patches, is I see the way that they've supposedly fixed this problem. And I can see just by looking at the code that this doesn't fix the problem at all. It might make the problem disappear, but it's basically just hiding the problem. It hasn't actually addressed the actual cause of the problem. It's just causing the symptom to not appear anymore. So when you review the code, you may notice that yourself and say, this doesn't really look right. I don't think this is solving the issue at hand here. And so you can leave your feedback about that. And that's a helpful thing to do, because people who don't have the technical skills don't really have a way to check that. They just know I had this problem, I applied this patch, and the problem goes away. So it looks good to me. And as I say, I've seen on more than one occasion in issue queue where people said, yep, this fixes my problem. This patch should be committed. And I'll look at it and I say, no, actually, it shouldn't be committed. This isn't fixing the problem at all. And it can be quite frustrating, actually, to get that communicated to people. Like, please, don't stop saying to apply this. This is not fixing your problem. You're going to have other problems on your site, potentially. So if you are somebody who does have a coding type background, it can be very helpful for you to actually do a review on patches sooner rather than later, so that there doesn't end up being an issue queue that's filled with all of these people saying, yes, comment number whatever fixes my problem. And then you get a bunch of people running off in the wrong direction with this. So review the patch and see if it looks good to you. If you want to take it to the next level, like for instance, maybe there was they didn't follow coding standards. And so you are going to correct that problem. Say, well, we need to tweak this patch this way. So you would update that patch so that it now does conform to coding standards. And you should make an interdiff when you do that. So people who are looking over this are able to see, here's the change that you made to the other patch. So, you would submit a new patch so that you've got the patch directly to apply. And you also want to submit the interdiff between your patch and the previous patch, so that anybody who has been looking at these things, like let's say somebody else had actually reviewed the patch and said, this doesn't conform to coding standards. And now you as a coder come along and notice that somebody made that comment. And so you make those corrections and you re-roll that patch so that it does conform to the coding standards. Then you can just go ahead and submit your patch and submit your interdiff, so that the person who had made the original comment is able to look at your interdiff and doesn't have to review your entire patch and can see, yes, very good, you've corrected this violation of coding standards, and now I'm pretty happy with this. So as a coder, you could help to clean up the patch and make it better. Let's say that you noticed when you review the patch that it's not just a coding standard violation. Maybe the person made some assumptions that they shouldn't make, and they're going to miss some cases because they didn't understand the module well enough and so there's some things that just they aren't flexible enough. And so maybe you'll correct that and say, well, actually, you shouldn't have used this function, or there was an API that you could have used. And there's some way that you'll fix things up so that the patch is going to be more robust. And you may take it even further than that, where you recognize the situation that this isn't fixing the problem at all. And I'm going to have another go at this, and I'm going to correct this patch so it actually fixes the problem. So there's opportunities that you have as a coder to get involved in the issue queue. Now, another thing that you may end up doing with a patch in the issue queue is that a patch may no longer apply because things have changed in the code base. And so you may need to re-roll the patch so that it will apply. And again, I'm not going to get into the details of how you go about re-rolling a patch. Sometimes it's easier than others. It depends on what's changed. And there is some documentation on Drupal.org. Although I have to admit, the last time I checked it, it was pretty complicated and quite confusing. So I don't know whether it's been improved since the last time I looked at it or not. We'll see. We'll see what's going on with that, because DrupalCon New Orleans is coming up, and I will be there. I will be taking part in the mentoring. I guess I don't know if I'm going to be doing core mentoring or whatever, but I'll be one of the mentors there. I'll be helping people to work in the issue queues. So I suppose I'll be having a look at that documentation and see whether it's good, that how it tells people how to re-roll the patches. And then finally, getting to the big one is that, let's say you are looking in the issue queue, you see that there is an issue against the module, and there is no patch written for it, and you've reproduced a problem. You can see it's definitely a problem. Maybe you came to that issue queue because you were having the problem yourself, and you searched around through Google or on Drupal.org, and you said, oh yes, there's an issue against this already. And then you actually decide to do the work to dig in and submit a patch for the module. And what you should know about this is that whether you know how to do this perfectly or not, even submitting a patch of any sort, and you might not even have a complete solution. You might have worked on some things, you figured part of the problem out, but you didn't figure all of the problem out. That's okay. Don't just leave that code on your computer. It's okay for you to upload a patch and attach a comment to it and say, well, I haven't entirely fixed this, but here's the work that I've done so far, and I at least want to give somebody a head start to have a look at what I've done and see what they can do with it, how they can make use of it, so they can extend it to potentially turn this into a full solution to the problem. So you can have your patch go anywhere from the first baby steps of addressing the problem, all the way to what you think is a complete solution. And I guess one other thing that I can mention about the way you can get involved in the issue queue, and it depends on the nature of the issue, because some issues that are reported might be like a user interface or user experience type of issue that's happening. And so even if you're a non-coder, you may be able to participate in the discussion of, well, how should we go about fixing this issue? What would be a good solution to this? So whether you're a coder or not a coder, what you might do in that issue queue is to just start the conversation. I think that we should fix this problem by doing these things. And if you're a non-coder, the suggestions that you're making would be more of, from a functional perspective, from an interface perspective. And if you're somebody who's technical, you may dig into the code level and say, oh, well, I think here's the problem here, that we've got to use this hook or that hook, or, that you may start getting into almost maybe pseudocode in your suggestions. So there is, as I hope I've illustrated here, you can see there's a broad spectrum of opportunities to get involved with the issue queues. And I guess on a closing note, what I will mention is that there's a reasonable amount of effort that people put into tagging issues to indicate which issues are good for novices. So if you're just first getting started in the issue queues, you can actually look for those issues that have been tagged for novices, and you can get your feet wet that way. So it doesn't have to be some overwhelming experience for you digging into something that's just going to be a monster problem to solve. So I hope I've inspired you to at least give some thought to whether you'd be willing to have a go at helping out in the issue queues, whether for core or contrib. It makes a difference either way. And that'll about wrap it for today. So as I mentioned, I am going to be in DrupalCon New Orleans. I will be serving as one of the mentors. My next week's chat is going to be about attending your first Drupal conference. Stop on by for the chat next week, but whether you're on the chat next week or not, if you are in DrupalCon New Orleans, and I guess it's like 2 weeks from now, basically, I will be heading out there, and you see me there, or you think to look for me there, come on by and say hello. And on Friday, look for me at one of the tables, and let's sit down together and let's see what we can do in those issue queues. So, ta-ta for now. Hope to see you next week. Hope to see you in New Orleans.